Did you know that Batman Arkham Origins was the first main Arkham game not designed by Rocksteady Studios? Instead, WB Games Montreal took the helm. The transition from Rocksteady Studios to WB Games Montreal for Batman Arkham Origins was a massive shift for sure. While Rocksteady had achieved legendary status with Asylum and City, they were quietly moving into deep development for Arkham Knight. Warner Bros. Interactive Entertainment didn't want the franchise to go dark for 4 years, so they tasked their newly formed Montreal studio with keeping the momentum alive. Folks, the decision to swap studios was primarily driven by hardware cycles and narrative preservation. Rocksteady was focused on the technical leap to the Unreal Engine 4 for Arkham Knight. Warner Bros. Montreal, meanwhile, was given the existing modified framework used for Arkham City. By making Origins a prequel, Warner Bros. Montreal was granted the freedom to tell a high-stakes story, including the first meeting of Batman and Joker, without accidentally breaking any of the plot points Rocksteady was planning for the series' grand finale. This wasn't a total blind handoff. Rocksteady provided Warner Bros. Montreal with their full codebase, asset libraries, and technical documentation from Arkham City. This is why the movement, combat, and even the menu sounds in Origins feels so identical to its predecessor. However, the Montreal team didn't just copy-paste. They had to reverse engineer Rocksteady's design philosophy. For WB Games Montreal, Origins was a sink-or-swim project. They were a relatively fresh studio at the time, and the pressure to live up to the Rocksteady name was immense. This led to several bold choices intended to differentiate the game from the previous entries. They leaned harder into cinematic boss fights like the choreographed parry fest with Deathstroke, which many fans argue actually surpassed Rocksteady's boss designs. To emphasize that these were younger versions of these characters, they made the controversial but ultimately praised choice to cast Roger Craig Smith and Troy Baker instead of the iconic Kevin Conroy and Mark Hamill. The new studio was also responsible for creating New Gotham, an entirely new landmass connected to the old Gotham seen in Arkham City, effectively doubling the map size. One of my favorite bosses from Arkham Origins is Killer Croc. Killer Croc was one of the 8 assassins who were hired by Black Mask to kill Batman for $50 million on Christmas Eve. Croc worked alongside someone he believed to be Black Mask, as they carried Commissioner Gillian B. Loeb to the execution chamber at Blackgate. As Black Mask escaped by helicopter, Croc stayed behind to take on Batman, who was in pursuit of the mobster. Eventually, he was defeated, and Batman demanded Black Mask's location. Croc didn't reveal this, but he revealed to Batman about the 7 other assassins that were hired before he was knocked out and found by the GCPD. Croc was seen briefly at Blackgate, attacking Batman during the Joker's riot. While the sniper was aiming, Batman was grabbed by Croc. Captain Gordon snuck up behind and knocked out the sniper with a baseball bat to save Batman's life. The bullet then hit Croc in his right shoulder, which caused him to drop Batman and retreat to his cell. In Arkham Origins, Killer Croc's mutation was not as severe as his appearance in Arkham Asylum. Killer Croc had green, scaly skin with a pale white hue to his chest. Croc was barefoot, although he had bandages that were wrapped around his feet and also had boxing hand wraps on his hands and wrists. Croc wore black trousers that had faint, white pinstripes. Croc had a black belt around his waist and had loose, red overalls. Croc was shirtless, a trait that had possibly carried over from his career as a wrestler, and had yellow eyes with black, slitted pupils. His teeth were all sharp, yellow fangs. Curiously, he had a few fangs protruding out through the skin of his upper and lower lips. From his chest upwards, Croc had scaly skin, yet his belly appeared to have softer skin and was not scaly like the rest of his body. When he escaped during the prison riot, Croc looked identical to his original version, the only difference being that he was wearing orange prison trousers with a large belt and a very large, padlock-shaped buckle. Croc had a slightly lean and muscular torso, and his navel was visible. At this time, he spoke with a Louisiana accent. Now, diving into the origins of the infamous monster, abandoned to his abusive and alcoholic aunt and bullied his entire life due to his appearance, the result of a genetic disorder that he was born with. Waylon Jones embraced his animal instincts and violently murdered and devoured his aunt after he finally reached his breaking point. Joining a traveling circus and adopting the stage name of Killer Croc, Jones bonded with his fellow carnival workers and felt like he had a family for the first time. That came to a tragic end, however, when vicious audience members in Gotham City destroyed the carnival and killed all who Jones had felt affection for. Seeking revenge on all humanity for their crimes, Croc began to devour countless individuals to survive, and became a monster in both body and spirit. Driven by a hatred and a bloodlust, Croc regularly worked with Gotham's various mob organizations as a brutal and cannibalistic hitman to satisfy his appetite for violence and money. Seeing all humans as selfish and judgmental sacks of flesh, Jones took orders from anyone who could provide him with money and a larger scope of victims. Most of you might not know that during the game development of Arkham Origins, the developers specifically aimed to portray Batman in his second year, making him more aggressive and less polished. Well, the Year 2 setting was the creative North Star for WB Games Montreal. While Arkham Asylum and Arkham City featured a Batman who was at the absolute peak of his career, where he was a legend who had already mastered his emotions, his gadgets, and his city, Origins takes us back to when Batman was still a myth. In his second year, he isn't the world's greatest detective yet. He's a terrifying, high-tech urban legend who relies on brute force and intimidation because he hasn't yet learned the value of surgical precision or strategic alliances. Visually, the developers wanted Batman to look like a flying tank rather than a sleek ninja. His suit in Origins is noticeably bulkier and more modular, featuring heavy plating and visible bolts. It looks like something Bruce Wayne put together in a workshop, rather than a high-end R&D facility. Even his cowl is designed to look more aggressive, with shorter ears and a permanent scowl. This unpolished look extends to his gadgets. For instance, the grapnel boost is explicitly described as an untested prototype, explaining why it's a bit more finicky and powerful than the refined version seen in the later games. In terms of gameplay, the Year 2 goal manifested in Batman's combat animations. In the Rocksteady games, Batman moves with a rhythmic, almost balletic grace. In Origins, he's faster and much more violent. His strikes have more weight to them, and his takedowns are often messy and loud. The shock gloves are the ultimate symbol of this era, as they represent Batman using overwhelming raw power to bypass technical combat challenges. Well, I think narratively, Year 2 allowed the writers to explore a Batman who's stubborn and arrogant. Bruce believes he's the only one who can save Gotham, leading to significant friction with Alfred. Their relationship in Origins is at its most strained point in the series, with Alfred constantly questioning Bruce's sanity, and Bruce dismissively treating Alfred like a butler rather than a partner. Similarly, his relationship with Jim Gordon starts with mutual distrust and physical altercations. By the end of the game, the Year 2 arc is completed not just by defeating the assassins, but by Batman realizing he can't win a war on crime alone, a realization that bridges the gap to the seasoned hero that we see in Asylum. If you've reached it this far and are having fun, why don't you subscribe to the channel? In Batman Arkham Origins, the relationship between Bruce Wayne and Alfred Pennyworth is the emotional heartbeat of the story, which some of you might have noticed while playing the game. Unlike the later games, where Alfred is a supportive tactical advisor, Origins portrays him as a grieving surrogate father who's actively terrified of what Bruce is becoming. He doesn't just help Batman, he tolerates him, often under protest, creating a friction that highlights Bruce's early career instability. The central conflict between the two peaks during a heated argument in the Batcave regarding Bruce's dual identity. Alfred expresses deep concern that Bruce is losing his humanity to the Batman persona, as if it's completely taking over him. He famously argues that Bruce Wayne is the mask, and the vigilante is the reality Bruce is choosing to inhabit. Alfred attempts to ground Bruce by reminding him of his social obligations, specifically a Christmas Eve dinner, to which Bruce dismissively responds that he's busy. When Alfred pleads, "You're not a monster, Bruce," Bruce's cold rebuttal is, "I'm whatever I need to be." This showcases the Year 2 arrogance discussed previously. This exchange is pivotal because it establishes that at this point in the timeline, Bruce views Alfred more as a servant or a nuisance than a partner. Alfred's resistance isn't born of a lack of loyalty, but of a desperate hope that Bruce will choose a life that doesn't end in a lonely grave. The tension reaches a breaking point when Bane, having deduced Batman's secret identity, infiltrates the Batcave. This is the first time in the series that we see the sanctuary of the cave truly violated. Alfred is caught in the crossfire and brutally attacked while Bruce is away. When Batman returns to find the cave in ruins and Alfred buried under rubble, the Year 2 bravado completely shatters. For the first time in the game, Bruce's voice drops its aggressive growl, replaced by genuine panic. The gameplay sequence where Batman must use the shock gloves to restart Alfred's heart is one of the most stressful and intimate moments in the franchise. It serves as a brutal wake-up call for Bruce. His crusade has consequences that extend beyond his own physical safety, and he cannot sustain this war without the man who raised him. As most of you noticed, by the end of the game, the dynamic shifts from resistance to a somber, mutual understanding. Alfred's role evolves from critic of the mission to its moral anchor. Alfred begins to provide more proactive intel, realizing that if he can't stop Bruce, he must ensure that Bruce survives. This happens after the events of Blackgate. Alfred stops trying to convince Bruce to come home for dinner, and instead focuses on mending the suit and the man. We all know that the Arkham games are filled with tons of references, and every one of them is a treat for the player. The inclusion of the Court of the Owls in Batman Arkham Origins was one of the most exciting deep-cut references at the time of the game's release. In 2013, the Court of Owls was still relatively new to the DC mythos, having debuted in Scott Snyder and Greg Capullo's 2011 Batman run. By hiding their nursery rhyme in the game, the devs signaled to hardcore comic fans that they were deeply invested in the modern New 52 lore, grounding this prequel in a version of Gotham that felt ancient, corrupt, and layered with secrets. Well, this specific nursery rhyme is found within the south pillar of the Gotham Pioneers Bridge. During the mission where Batman is tracking down Firefly to disarm the bombs, players can explore the internal maintenance rooms of the bridge. On a desk in one of these cluttered rooms lies an open book. If you zoom in using the first-person camera or Batman's zoom function, you can clearly read the chilling poem that kept Gotham's children, and its elite, in a state of whispered fear for centuries. As you further explore, you'll see that the book is surrounded by blueprints and tools, suggesting that even the architects and workers of Gotham's infrastructure were either aware of the court or were being watched by them. It serves as a haunting reminder that while Batman is busy fighting colourful villains like the Clown Prince of Gotham, there's a much older, silent threat woven into the very stone and steel of the city. The text in the book contains the full, classic version of the rhyme. Beware the Court of Owls, that watches all the time, ruling Gotham from a shadowed perch, behind granite and lime. They watch you at your hearth. They watch you in your bed. Speak not a whispered word of them, or they'll send the talon for your head. This wasn't just a static texture, it was a piece of environmental foreshadowing. Throughout the game, particularly at the Royal Hotel, you can find statues of owl-like warriors. To a casual player, these look like standard Gothic architecture, but to someone who has read the book on the bridge, they're clearly statues of talents, the court's undead assassins. The fact that these statues appear in the hotel where the Joker hosts his assassin meeting suggests that the court has been watching the events of Origins unfold with a cold, calculated interest. What makes this detail so special is how it reframes the Arkham universe. Up until Origins, the game's focused on the freaks of Arkham, or the shadow of the League of Assassins. By placing the court's rhyme in a prequel, the developers established that the court was always there, even before the Joker arrived. It added a sense of historical weight to Gotham. It also served as a bit of a meta tease for the studio's future. For years, fans speculated that WB Games Montreal was working on a full Court of Owls game, a rumour that eventually culminated in the release of Gotham Knights, which, while a different universe, featured the court as the primary antagonist. In Arkham Origins, the nursery rhyme was the first breadcrumb in a trail that would lead fans to explore the deepest, darkest corners of Gotham's history. The tripping mechanics remain one of the most fascinating what-ifs in the development of Batman Arkham Origins. During the early prototyping phase, the design team at WB Games Montreal was obsessed with the idea of mechanical storytelling. They wanted the player to feel Bruce Wayne's lack of experience through the controller, rather than just seeing it in the cutscenes. The idea was to move away from the perfect superhero archetype and introduce a layer of human error that reflected a vigilante still finding his footing. Well, in these early builds, Batman wasn't the flawless gymnast we know today. The developers experimented with stumble frames and accuracy penalties. In the game, if Batman sprinted for too long or tried to navigate complex terrain like jagged rooftops or icy patches too quickly, there was a small percentage chance he would stumble or lose his balance, requiring a quick button prompt to recover. Also, unlike the peak Batman of Arkham City, whose batarangs have near-perfect auto-aim, the Origins prototype required much tighter manual aiming. If the player fired a batarang hastily, Batman might throw it slightly wide or with too much force, causing it to clatter uselessly against a wall. The goal was to show that his muscle memory hadn't been fully encoded yet. Ultimately, the mechanics were cut because they violated the core power fantasy of the Arkham series. In playtesting, the feedback was overwhelmingly negative. Not because the idea was bad, but because it felt like bad game design rather than character growth. Players who had spent hundreds of hours mastering the precision of the previous games felt that the tripping was a glitch or a lag spike. It broke the free-flow rhythm that defines the franchise. When a player presses a button to counter and Batman trips instead, the player doesn't think, oh, Batman is inexperienced. Instead, they think, well, the game just didn't register my input. While the literal tripping was removed to keep the gameplay smooth, the spirit of the idea was moved into the animation system. If you watch the animations in Origins closely compared to Arkham City, you'll notice that Batman's landings are much heavier and less graceful. He often uses his hands to stabilize himself, and his combat strikes involve more overswinging, where he puts too much weight into a punch, leaving him momentarily more exposed than the older Batman. This allowed the developers to convey his raw, unrefined nature without actually taking control away from the player. The introduction of the Batwing fast travel system was a direct response to the massive map expansion of the game. While Arkham City was celebrated for its density, it was relatively compact, as a skilled player could glide from one end of the prison to the other in a minute. Arkham Origins, however, effectively doubled the playable area with the new, neon-soaked New Gotham, the Diamond District and Coventry. Connecting these two landmasses was the Gotham Pioneers Bridge, a massive structural bottleneck that made manual travel feel tedious over long distances, as players might get bored. To prevent the player from getting annoyed, the devs implemented the Batwing as a way to maintain the game's pacing. Unlike the traditional teleport system that you might have seen in many open-world games, the Batwing in Origins is integrated into lore and the gameplay loop. Before you can use the Batwing to travel to a specific district, you first have to liberate the Gotham City radio tower in that area. These towers were being jammed by Edward Nashton, and clearing them functioned as a mini-puzzle encounter. This liberating tower to open map system can also be seen in the Far Cry games. Anyhow, once a tower is secured, Batman can summon the Batwing to a designated drop zone. The transition isn't an instant jump. It features a cinematic of the Batwing swooping through the clouds, which effectively serves as a stylized loading screen. This allowed the developers to purge the hardware's RAM and load the new district's assets without breaking the player's immersion. The Pioneer's Bridge is arguably the most controversial part of the Origins map. While it is an impressive set piece, it's incredibly long and relatively empty, acting as a physical divider between two halves of the city. The developers realized early in testing that requiring players to glide across this bridge every time they had a mission in the opposite district was killing the momentum of the story. By introducing the Batwing, they allowed players to skip the dead air of the bridge while still keeping it as a functional part of the world for specific story missions like the Firefly boss fight. Interestingly, the Batwing is also the only way to return to the Batcave, which is located far off the main map on an island in the harbour. From a technical standpoint, the Batwing was a necessity for the aging Xbox 360 and PS3 hardware, because the map was so large the consoles couldn't hold the entire city in their memory at once. The Batwing travel sequence provided a constant buffer time for the engine to unload the high-resolution textures of the Diamond District and to load the assets for the Industrial District. Without this system, players might have experienced texture popping, or even invisible walls if they tried to move too fast across the bridge using the grapnel boost. This was the devs' clever way of turning a hardware limitation into a cool, cinematic feature that made the player feel like a high-tech billionaire. Another one of my favourite boss fight characters is Anarchy. The design and detail of this character were totally awesome. Let's discuss this character in a bit of detail. Well, in Batman Arkham Origins, Anarchy plotted an elaborate scheme during the night of Christmas Eve, and promised that by sunrise, Gotham's sources of corruption would be destroyed. To that end, he planted at least 3 bombs around Gotham City that Batman had to hunt down and disarm. In addition, Anarchy recruited the city's homeless population, who were fanatically loyal to him and were willing to die for his cause. Anarchy contacted Batman via projection as he was exiting the final offer. He stated that he planted 3 bombs where Gotham's corruption is at its highest. It was up to the Dark Knight whether or not to let it be destroyed. The first bomb was placed on the roof of Gotham's Merchants Bank. He did this in order to prevent the bank owners from using the bank to launder money and to keep any employees from embezzling funds or denying loans to people who needed them. This bomb was defused by Batman. Anarchy sent one of his men to tell Batman the location of the second bomb, the Gotham Casino. He thought a business such as a casino would surely be too corrupt for Batman to save. However, Batman defused the bomb before it blew up. He was now sure that the third and final bomb would be detonated. He had it located behind the GCPD building. This was to kill all the corrupt police officers, like Lieutenant Brandon. One final time, Batman defeats the gang of anarchists and defuses the bomb. He contacted the Caped Crusader, saying how surprised he was that all 3 institutions were left standing. Anarchy told him to meet him at the Solomon Wayne courthouse. Once there, Anarchy suggested that they team up together, but Batman declined before Anarchy had his henchmen attack him. Batman defeated them all and took down Anarchy, who turned out to be a teenage boy. Anarchy told Batman that he felt they were both the same. However, Batman refuted Anarchy by reminding him that he nearly killed several innocent people for the sake of his own goals. Anarchy contemptuously stated that the people of Gotham weren't innocent, that they were simply weak, and so was Batman. Anarchy then began a very long rant in which he initially pointed out what they could offer and learn from each other. By the end of his rant, he had rescinded his offer, laying the blame of Gotham's deterioration upon Batman's actions. Batman left Anarchy for the GCPD. Diving into the lore of the character for you guys, we found that Anarchy is a political activist who expressed contempt for governments and corporations. He has charges of trespassing, destruction and damage of public and governmental state property, destruction and damage of private property, damage and destruction of corporate property, and unregistered demonstrations or protests. He's not reluctant to resort to violence, acts of murder or terrorism. He also has an extremely high sense of self-importance. His whereabouts after the events of Origins are unknown. His mask and jacket later ended up at the GCPD Evidence Archive, where a recording by Aaron Cash explains that, despite being a minor, he was imprisoned because the government had little tolerance for anarchists. Earlier reports flagged Lonnie Machin as a graffiti artist with anti-authoritarian or anarchist leanings. Anarchy was suspected of organizing radical protests, occupying public spaces, erecting tent cities and other public disturbances. Anarchy used social media and hacktivism to harass political figures, business leaders and peace officers. Anarchy targeted individuals and organizations of financial success or prominence. Reports of recent radicalization from undercover officers, the acquisition of well-known precursors, suggested attempts at manufacturing explosive devices. Anarchy was wanted on charges of trespassing, destruction of public property, destruction of government property, and unregistered demonstrations. He was added to the domestic terrorist watch. Earlier, I mentioned his character design. Anarchy appeared wearing a hood around his head. He wore a red sweater in his jacket, and wore an anarchist mask on his face. He wore a scarf around his neck and a red jacket with an anarchy symbol and 3 buttons. A smile, an anarchy symbol, and a red button on one of the collars of his jacket. Anarchy carried a backpack on his back. Anarchy wore a black and yellow belt with pockets around the belt, red pants with kneecaps with a handprint on his right kneecap, and boots with yellow lining. You might have noticed the name Edward Nashton that I mentioned earlier in the video. Well, it's the Riddler. At this point in the timeline, he operates under the alias Enigma, and he hasn't yet donned the flamboyant green suit, or developed his trademark obsession with leaving literal riddles at crime scenes. Instead, he's portrayed as a sophisticated cyber terrorist and information broker who views himself as a digital vigilante, aiming to expose the true face of Gotham's corruption through blackmail and data theft. Unlike the later games, where he's a notorious fugitive, in Origins, Edward Nashton holds a legitimate and highly dangerous position as the head of the GCPD's cybercrime division. This role is the skeleton key that allows him to infiltrate the city's most secure networks. He didn't join the police to serve the law. He joined to gain unfettered access to the personal files of every judge, politician, and police officer in Gotham. As Enigma, he uses this data to compile extortion files, which he threatens to release on Christmas Day to trigger a cleansing of the city's elite. This makes him a dark mirror to Batman. Both men want to fix Gotham, but while Batman uses his fists to fight criminals, Enigma uses stolen secrets to destroy the systems that protect them. The Enigma persona is woven into the game's core mechanics, specifically through the Gotham City radio towers. Because he's jammed the city's communications, Batman is forced to physically infiltrate these towers and dismantle Enigma's signal jammers to restore the Batwing's fast travel capabilities, as we discussed previously. Instead of the Riddler trophies seen in Arkham City, players must track down 200 Enigma data packs. These aren't just collectibles, they're encrypted fragments of the 20 extortion files. Interrogating his data handlers, Enigma's equivalent of Riddler informants, reveals the location of these packs, further emphasizing his role as a master of information rather than a master of puzzles. Diving a little into Riddler's origins, the shift from Enigma to the Riddler is foreshadowed throughout the game's final stages and side missions. In his secret lair located behind a billboard in the Bernie district, Batman finds evidence that Nashton is already becoming obsessed with the Dark Knight's identity. On his wall, he's narrowed down the potential identity of Batman to 2 candidates, Bruce Wayne and Harvey Dent. The true origin of the Riddler occurs when Batman finally shuts down his server. Nashton is infuriated, not just because his plan failed, but because Batman proved to be a superior intellectual force. If you collect every data pack and visit his lair, you find the first ever Riddler trophy, a crude, green glowing prototype of the mechanical question marks that he would later scatter across the city. This trophy serves as his calling card for the future, marking the moment he abandons his role as a data thief to become a costumed supervillain dedicated solely to outsmarting the one man who can challenge his intellect. We've discussed a little about Deathstroke in our Batman Arkham Knight video, but in Batman Arkham Origins, he's like an ultimate boss, and they also gave us the treat of an awesome boss fight sequence. His role in Arkham Origins is very significant. Sometime before Christmas Eve, Deathstroke attempted to do his first assassination attempt via some of Black Mask's men delivering a crate from Queen Industries, which contained a bomb meant for the Dark Knight. Batman narrowly managed to escape the blast, with Deathstroke fighting him in an even combat, although the assassin gradually got the upper hand. However, he was prevented from killing his quarry by Deadshot, another of the assassins who was also hired by Black Mask. Shortly after Batman escaped into the night, Deathstroke confronted Black Mask over contracting at least one other assassin besides himself, only to be rebuffed by the crime lord. Deathstroke remained in Gotham during the initial attack on Blackgate, preferring to wait for Batman to come to him. Shortly after, Batman was busy in Gotham, dealing with the other assassins and criminals trying to make a name for themselves. Afterwards, Deathstroke tracked down Batman to the ship, the Final Offer, where he saved the Penguin from Batman by using his remote claw. Deathstroke tried to attack Batman with his sword while he was suspended upside down. However, Batman grabbed the sword, cut himself free, and both fighters moved down into the fighting pit. Both combatants put up a formidable fight. During the encounter, Batman managed to break both Deathstroke's mask and bowstaff. Eventually, the Caped Crusader threw Deathstroke's sword into the wall to distract him, and knocked the assassin out by slamming his head into the hilt with a kick. After the battle, Batman received the remote claw from Deathstroke and continued after Penguin. Deathstroke was brought to Blackgate Prison, where he was later seen in his cell. He was the only inmate not released during the Joker's rampage. In his cell, Deathstroke was doing push-ups and stated that he had no quarrel with Batman and was merely after the bounty. Deathstroke elaborated that if he were let out, he would kill Joker in retaliation for retracting the offer. Now, when I said awesome boss fight sequence, I wasn't lying. Unlike other bosses who rely on minions, giant health bars or environmental hazards, Deathstroke is designed to be Batman's tactical equal. The fight strips away the player's reliance on cheesing with gadgets and forces a pure, rhythmic mastery of the free-flow combat system, specifically the timing of counters and the counter-counter mechanic. The fight is meticulously choreographed into 3 distinct phases, each escalating in speed and lethality. Deathstroke uses his ballistic staff to keep Batman at a distance. He's highly defensive. If you strike him directly, he will almost always parry. You must wait for his attack, counter it, and then land a few hits before he resets. After taking enough damage, Slade begins using smoke pellets to reposition and launch high-speed leaping attacks. The camera shifts to more cinematic angles, and the player must perform a timed counter, which means you must hit the counter button only when the prompt appears during a grapple, rather than mashing it. In the final stretch, Deathstroke loses his staff and draws his sword. His attacks become faster, his combos longer, and a single missed parry can take a massive chunk of Batman's health. This phase requires the player to be perfect with their rhythm, reacting to the metallic clink of the sword to stay alive. What makes this fight uniquely difficult for newcomers is the wait for the flash mechanic. During specific grapple sequences, Slade will attempt to hit Batman multiple times. If the player presses the counter button too early, panicking, Batman will fail the move and take damage. You must wait for the prompt to reappear mid-animation. This was a deliberate design choice by WB Montreal to simulate 2 masters of martial arts reading each other's movements. It turns a standard action sequence into a high-stakes rhythm game, where patience is rewarded more than aggression. Some of you might have noticed the reference to the Graysons. The Flying Graysons poster in Batman Arkham Origins is one of the most poignant examples of environmental storytelling in the entire franchise. While traversing the cold, snow-covered streets of Gotham, specifically in the Amusement Mile and Dixon Docks districts, players can stumble upon vibrant, colourful advertisements for Halley's Circus. Unlike the posters seen in Arkham City, which were weathered, torn, and looked decades old, these posters are pristine and prominently feature the text, "Coming Soon," printed across the bottom. This is a deliberate narrative plant by the developers to emphasize that, in this Year 2 timeline, the tragic event that creates Robin hasn't happened yet. The most famous instance of this poster is located near the Monarch Theatre in Bowery, the very site where Thomas and Martha Wayne were murdered. This placement is no accident. By putting a coming soon poster for a family of acrobats near the site of Batman's own origin, the devs create a chilling parallel. The poster depicts John, Mary, and a young Dick Grayson in their signature blue and yellow costumes, performing a daring mid-air maneuver. To the casual player, it's a nice nod to DC lore, but to a fan, it's a ticking clock. It signifies that somewhere in this city, at this very moment, a young boy is still happy, unaware that his life is about to mirror Bruce Wayne's in a matter of months or even weeks. The coming soon tag anchors Arkham Origins effectively in a specific window of DC history. In the Arkham universe, Dick Grayson typically becomes Robin shortly after Batman's second or third year. Since this game takes place on Christmas Eve of Year 2, the arrival of Hell's Circus suggests that the Grayson tragedy is the next major event on the horizon. It underscores Batman's isolation during the events of Origins. He's a lone wolf fighting 8 assassins, completely unaware that his future partner and son is currently traveling toward Gotham in a circus caravan. This detail adds a layer of tragic irony to the game. Batman is fighting to save a city that's about to fail another child in the same way it failed him. What's even crazier about this particular Easter egg is how it rewards players who played the previous games. In Arkham City, players could find a singular, tattered Flying Grayson's poster in the ruins of the circus, which felt like a ghost of a bygone era. By presenting the same poster in Origins as a current event advertisement, the developers use a simple environmental asset to bridge the gap between the two games. It transforms the world of Gotham from a static game map into a living, breathing timeline. Furthermore, in the Cold Heart DLC, there are additional references to the circus, further cementing the idea that the world is being prepared for the eventual arrival of the Boy Wonder. The Joker's Black Mask reveal is the most significant narrative pivot in Batman Arkham Origins. Up until the midpoint of the game, players and Batman himself are led to believe that Roman Sionis, the brutal mob boss known as the Black Mask, is the primary antagonist who hired the 8 assassins. In reality, the Joker had infiltrated Gotham's underworld months prior, kidnapped the real Sionis, and assumed his identity to use his vast resources and Black Mask persona to orchestrate a city-wide manhunt for Batman. Well, in reality, the Joker didn't just put on a mask. He systematically dismantled Roman Sionis' life to ensure the disguise was impenetrable. He kidnapped Sionis and his girlfriend, Tiffany Ambrose, holding them captive in a frantic, sadistic game of house to maintain the ruse. Joker forced Sionis to watch as he murdered Tiffany, effectively breaking the mob boss's spirit. During the early stages of the game, when Black Mask is seen as Blackgate Prison or the Still Mill, the character is voiced by Brian Bloom, who also voiced the real Black Mask, which helped him maintain the illusion for the players. However, as the Black Mask persona becomes more erratic and bloodthirsty, shifting from a desire for profit to a desire for theatrical chaos, clues began to surface that the man behind the mask was not a traditional crime lord. The facade finally shatters during the heist at the Gotham Merchants Bank. Batman tracks Black Mask there, expecting a confrontation with a mobster, only to find the real Roman Sionis locked in a vault, terrified and humiliated. The Black Mask standing before the money-littered floor then removes his mask to reveal the Joker's painted face, accompanied by Troy Baker's haunting transition from the deep, gruff tones of Sionis to the high-pitched, manic cackle of the clown prince of crime. This moment is iconic because it shifts the stakes of the game entirely. The $50 million bounty wasn't about professional rivalry or territory. It was a grand invitation issued by the Joker to find a worthy opponent. The Joker reveals that he spent Sionis' entire fortune not to get rich, but to buy a meeting with the legendary Batman. If you're an observant player like me, the game left several breadcrumbs suggesting that Black Mask wasn't who he claimed to be. as we know that the real Roman Sionis is a businessman, and he would never have personally gone to Blackgate Prison just to execute a warden. The Black Mask at the start of the game was too hands-on. Also, in the Penguin's files, there are mentions of Black Mask's behavior changing overnight, becoming crazy and unpredictable, which we all know are classic Joker traits. Did you know that Batman Arkham Origins is the only Arkham game to feature an online multiplayer mode? Well, the multiplayer mode titled Invisible Predator Online was a bold departure for the franchise. It was designed by a completely different studio known as Splash Damage, who were known for Gears of War multiplayer and Brink, rather than the main campaign team at Warner Bros. Montreal. It attempted to blend third-person cover shooting with the signature Predator stealth of the Arkham series. It was a 3v3v2 asymmetrical experience that pitted two rival gang factions against each other, while Batman and Robin hunted them both from the shadows. For me, the core of the experience was a three-way tug-of-war. Two teams of 3 players, representing Joker's clown gang and Bane's mercenaries, fought for control over tactical points on the map in a traditional cover-based shooter format. However, the game was fundamentally disrupted by a third team, 2 players acting as Batman and Robin. The elite thugs had to manage their reinforcement tickets. If a team lost all their lives, they lost the match. Meanwhile, the heroes didn't care about kills. Their goal was to fill an intimidation meter by performing varied and terrifying takedowns. If Batman and Robin terrified the gangs enough, the thugs would flee the map, handing the victory to the dynamic duo. This created a unique tension, where thugs were constantly looking at the ceiling, while simultaneously trading gunfire with rivals. One of the most exciting mechanics was the boss door. Midway through a match, a radio broadcast would announce that either Joker or Bane was ready to enter the fray. The first player on the respective team to reach the designated door would transform into the iconic villain. Splash Damage implemented a deep progression system called the Black Market. Players could customize their elite thugs with different outfits, masks, and weapon loadouts. This included a variety of gadgets inspired by the campaign, such as tactical darts, specialized grenades, and different ammo types. Despite its cult following, the multiplayer mode faced a difficult lifespan. It was notoriously buggy at launch and was entirely omitted from the Wii U version of the game. Furthermore, when the Batman Arkham trilogy was released for later consoles, Origins was skipped entirely, making the multiplayer a lost piece of gaming history. Sadly, Warner Bros. Officially shut down the servers in December 2016. On PC, the multiplayer functionality can still be accessed through minor file hex editing, or community-made mods, as the peer-to-peer coding for the matches themselves still exists within the game files, even if the matchmaking servers are gone. The script of Batman Arkham Origins was a massive undertaking, reaching a scale and psychological complexity that dwarfed the relatively straightforward gauntlet narrative of Arkham Asylum. While Asylum focused on a single night of containment, the Origins script was designed as a character study. It sought to answer a fundamental question. Why do these two specific individuals, Batman and Joker, need each other? This resulted in a script that was roughly 3 times the length of Asylum's, filled with heavy philosophical dialogue and intricate character arcs. The narrative centerpiece of the script is the evolving link between Batman and Joker. In Asylum, their relationship is already established and almost routine. In Origins, the script meticulously tracks the Joker's transition from a bored criminal to a man who has found his purpose. The psychological depth is best showcased during the Royal Hotel sequence and the subsequent Blackgate Chapel finale. The script uses the Joker not just as a villain, but as a narrator of Batman's own internal struggle. In the bank reveal, the dialogue shifts from mob boss threats to a haunting realization. When Joker says, "You're the one thing I didn't count on, the one thing that makes sense," it marks a scripted turning point where the story stops being a crime thriller and becomes a dark romance of ideological opposites. Perhaps the most script-heavy and ambitious part of the game is the interactive sequence inside the Joker's mind. After being captured, Joker undergoes a psychiatric evaluation with Harleen Quinzel. The script pivots into a playable flashback, where Joker recounts his one bad day as the Red Hood. This sequence required a separate narrative layer that blended Joker's unreliable narration with Bruce Wayne's own perspective. It allowed the writers to explore the Killing Joke origins, while simultaneously showing Dr. Quinzel's slow descent into obsession. The depth here is unparalleled in the series. It isn't just a cutscene, but a scripted environment where the dialogue changes based on where the player walks and what they interact with, creating a claustrophobic sense of Joker's deteriorating psyche. Most of us know that in Batman Arkham Origins, Bane is portrayed with a level of intellectual depth and tactical brilliance that is far more faithful to his comic book roots, specifically the Nightfall arc, than his appearances in Arkham Asylum or City. While later games depicted him as a chemically dependent brute, Origins introduces a version of Bane who's a master strategist, a polyglot, and a psychological predator. He is the only assassin who doesn't just wait for Batman to show up. He actively hunts the Dark Knight, studying his patterns and weaknesses with the precision of a master general. Bane's intelligence is evidenced by his leadership of a professional mercenary army, rather than a standard street gang. He's shown operating out of a sophisticated tactical hub where he analyzes Gotham's infrastructure and Batman's movements. Unlike the other assassins who underestimate the rookie Batman, Bane recognizes him as a significant threat from the start. This tactical superiority is displayed during his first encounter with Batman at a royal hotel. Bane isn't there to simply trade punches. He uses the encounter to test Batman's limits and observe his equipment. He even utilizes a jammer to disrupt Batman's communication with Alfred, showing he understands the importance of cutting off a hero's support network. His dialogue throughout the game is calm, cold, and calculated, devoid of the mindless rage that defines his later Titan-obsessed self. Well, the pinnacle of Bane's intellectual portrayal is his deduction that Batman is Bruce Wayne. It's like he was a detective himself. He arrives at this conclusion not through luck, but through a systemic process of elimination and observation. Bane realizes that the level of technology Batman utilizes requires the backing of a multi-billion-dollar corporation. By cross-referencing Batman's appearances with high society events and city logistics, he narrows down the candidates. When Batman is momentarily weakened, Bane confirms his theory, leading to the chilling sequence where he invades the Batcave. This is a massive narrative stake. For the first time in the series, a villain has completely bypassed Batman's defenses and brought the war to his front door. When he tells Batman, "I am in your house, Bruce," it isn't a boast. It's a declaration of total tactical dominance. The intelligence arc of Bane concludes with a tragic narrative bridge to the later games. During the final confrontation at Blackgate, Bane realizes he can't defeat Batman through standard means and injects himself with an experimental, highly concentrated version of Venom called TN1. While this drug grants him monstrous physical strength and size, the script explicitly details its horrific side effects: severe neural degeneration and permanent memory loss. By the end of the fight, the brain damage caused by the TN1 overdose has literally wiped the secret of Batman's identity from Bane's mind. This serves as a brilliant lore explanation for why Bane is simpler and lacks this vital knowledge in Arkham Asylum and City. It transforms him from a formidable rival into a cautionary tale of the cost of power. Setting Batman Arkham Origins on Christmas Eve was a deliberate stylistic choice that served as more than just a seasonal backdrop. It functioned as a thematic pillar for the entire narrative. The developers utilized the holiday noir aesthetic, reminiscent of films like Die Hard or Batman Returns, to create a sharp, biting contrast between the traditional themes of peace, family, and light, and the raw, violent reality of Bruce Wayne's early career. By trapping the city in a perpetual blizzard, the game creates a sense of isolation and hunker-down survivalism that mirrors Batman's own psychological state. The visual identity of the game is defined by the juxtaposition of festive decorations and urban decay. Throughout the Diamond District and the Bowery, you see massive Christmas trees, strings of colourful lights, and Happy Holidays banners, all of which are covered in soot and grime or flickering due to the city's crumbling infrastructure. The dynamic snow system, which was further enhanced on PC via PhysX, allows snow to accumulate on Batman's cape and shoulders in real time, making the player feel the bite of the cold. This setting also provides a logical reason for the streets to be relatively empty of civilians. Most of Gotham's citizens are huddled in their homes for the holiday, leaving the city a playground for the freaks and the corrupt GCPD. The lighting is notably different from that in previous games, favouring warm indoor ambers over cold outdoor blues. This technique emphasises Batman's outsider status, looking in on the warmth of human connection. The music of the game also plays a major role. Composer Christopher Drake leans into the Christmas theme heavily, with a score that incorporates sleigh bells, tubular bells, and pipe organs, but twists them into something sinister. The main theme is a dark, heavy orchestral arrangement that mimics the rhythm of Carol of the Bells, with a pounding percussion that suggests an approaching threat rather than a celebration. The music is particularly effective during the Royal Hotel sequence, where the Joker has decked the halls with macabre, oversized holiday ornaments and lethal presents. In this context, Christmas becomes a weapon. The Joker views the $50 million bounty and the chaos he brings as a gift to Batman, a way to force the Dark Knight out of his shell and into the light of the public eye. Narratively, Christmas Eve highlights the fractured relationship between Bruce and Alfred. While Alfred spent the evening preparing a traditional Christmas dinner, Bruce spent it hunting a crocodile man at Blackgate. This creates a recurring ticking clock element, where Alfred repeatedly asks Bruce to stay home for the holiday, which Bruce dismisses as work. Earlier in the video, I mentioned a virus, TN1, which was injected by Bane, making him a monster. The TN1 formula is the tragic narrative glue that connects the hyper-intelligent Bane of Arkham Origins to the mindless juggernaut seen in Arkham Asylum. Throughout the game, Bane is depicted as a man of immense discipline, using standard venom in controlled doses to enhance his strength without sacrificing his tactical mind. However, during the game's climax in the depths of Blackgate Prison, Bane is pushed to a psychological and physical breaking point. Realizing that he can't defeat Batman through sheer skill or standard chemical enhancement, he injects himself with a massive, concentrated dose of the experimental TN1 prototype, a move that permanently alters the course of his life and the Arkham lore. The injection of TN1 triggers a horrific, near instantaneous mutation. Unlike the Titan formula seen in later games, which was an attempt to stabilize and weaponize this effect, TN1 is raw and unstable. Bane's muscle mass expands to grotesque proportions. His skin pulls taut over his frame, and he loses all vestiges of his human personality, becoming a creature of pure, instinctual aggression. From a gameplay perspective, this transformation turns the final encounter into a stealth horror boss fight. Batman, realizing he can no longer hurt Bane with strikes or gadgets, is forced to hide in floor grates and vents. TN1 grants Bane a heightened hunter's sense, allowing him to sniff out Batman and rip him from cover. The sheer power of this formula is such that if Bane catches the player, it results in an immediate, bone-crushing game over, emphasizing that the tactical Bane has been replaced by an unstoppable force of nature. The most significant detail regarding TN1 is its neurotoxic side effect. The chemical is so potent that it effectively cooks the brain of the user. Following the fight, after Batman uses the shock gloves to jumpstart Bane's heart and counteract the overdose, the damage is already done. The massive surge of TN1 caused severe, retrograde amnesia. This is the brilliant narrative retcon. It explains why Bane, who had successfully deduced that Batman was Bruce Wayne earlier in the game, has no memory of this fact in Arkham Asylum or Arkham City. The drug essentially wiped his higher functions, his deductive reasoning, his mastery of languages, and his knowledge of Batman's identity, leaving behind only the hulking, venom-addicted brute that fans first met in the earlier released games. We all know that in the Arkham series, the Batcave is usually a place Batman is either exiled from or only visits during scripted story beats. Batman Arkham Origins broke this trend by making the Batcave a fully functional, persistent hub that the player can return to at any point during free roam. Located on a private island in Gotham's harbour, it's accessible via the Batwing's fast travel system. This design choice was vital for the Year 2 narrative. It allowed the developers to show the contrast between the freezing, hostile streets of Gotham and the safety of Bruce Wayne's sanctuary. Well, if you ask me, the Batcave in Origins feels far more interactive than the mini-cave found in Arkham Asylum. It serves as the primary location for character development between Bruce and Alfred. You can walk up to Alfred at almost any time to engage in optional conversations. These dialogues grant small amounts of XP and provide deep lore about Bruce's training abroad, or Alfred's history in the British Guard. Additionally, the cave features a trophy gallery that updates in real time. As you defeat the 8 assassins and major villains, their equipment, such as Killer Croc's shackles or the Executioner's rig, appears on display, giving the player a tangible sense of progression that was missing from the menu-based trophies of previous games. Mechanically, the Batcave serves as the game's control center. It houses the combat training console, which allows players to jump into challenge maps directly from the game world without exiting to the main menu, a feature that remains unique to Origins. This was designed to help players master the martial artist counters and shock glove timing in a safe environment. Furthermore, the cave contains the suit chamber, where players can swap between various DLC skins, like the Brightest Day or Gotham by Gaslight suits. In other Arkham titles, changing suits usually required a full restart or was restricted to New Game Plus. But Origins treated the Batcave as a literal dressing room for the Dark Knight. Visually, the Origins Batcave is a stark departure from the high-tech bunkers seen in the comics or Arkham Knight. It's depicted as a cavernous construction site. You can see scaffolding everywhere, raw rock faces that haven't been smoothed down, and primitive computer monitors that lack the sleek holographic interface of the later games. One of the coolest hidden details is the Batmobile sitting under a heavy tarp. If you look closely, you can see its massive tires and tank-like frame, heavily foreshadowing the vehicle Batman would eventually use in the Arkham Knight. Not just that, the player actually sees the Batwing docked and being serviced by mechanical arms, emphasizing that Batman's fast travel is a logistical feat, not just a game mechanic. This grounded approach makes the cave feel like a startup operation for a vigilante who's still building his empire. Throughout the Arkhamverse, we've been introduced to the Calendar Man. But what's the big deal about him? Well, Calendar Man was a criminal that Batman had successfully investigated, arrested, and labeled Case 153 CM. Calendar Man was then sentenced to death for his crimes, and was sent to Blackgate Prison for his last days. The extortion files revealed that Day was originally declared insane by Harleen Quinzel, but Warden Joseph convinced her to change her diagnosis so that he could be sentenced to death by Judge Harkness, only under the condition that she be allowed to conduct psychiatric evaluations for all new prisoners moving forward. On Christmas Eve, Calendar Man was scheduled to be executed, and was en route to the prison gas chamber when the Joker, impersonating Black Mask, and his gang began an invasion of the facility, saving the killer from his would-be capital punishment. Black Mask freed Calendar Man, and forced Commissioner Loeb into the gas chamber to be executed in his place, though not before telling Day that the former owed him for this. Day assassinated Judge Fremont Harkness later that same night by hanging him from the roof of his mansion with a string of Christmas lights. Diving deeper into his lore, fixated on the calendar, Julian Gregory Day became Calendar Man, a villain who timed and tied his murders thematically to certain holidays throughout the year, and often left clues by which he could be caught. Gotham City's hopes for a day off were often clouded by the knowledge that any holiday of note was likely to be overshadowed by Calendar Man's presence. For his personality, Julian Day has a creepily calm demeanor. His soft-spoken voice contrasts with his heavy appearance and many violent actions as a serial killer. Whilst many other villains in Batman's rogue gallery feign calamity, Day appears to be genuine, except in his notes, when he expresses with anger that Scarecrow's terrorist attack on Gotham delayed his plans. This viewpoint presumably comes from his fixation with dates that disassociates him from reality and the importance of people. One inmate claims that when he visited Day, the Calendar Man looked at him like he was nothing, or how a kid looks at an ant before he steps on it. Day is regarded as one of the most heinous killers in Gotham's history. This is shown by how he's imprisoned within Arkham City, a place where even the most notorious criminals, such as the Joker, Penguin, and Zsasz, roam free. Many other criminals are wary of him, including Catwoman. Some, like the Joker, admire his work and attempt to use him for his intelligence, brutality, and showmanship, especially during the holidays. Day appeared to target women more as his victims. When speaking to Batman about his various crimes, 3 of them were women whom he stalked and murdered due to an imagined romantic attachment. Despite foiling him countless times, Day doesn't see Batman as a threat. In Day's mind, they paralleled one another, having started their respective careers as a vigilante and serial killer at a similar time in life and built off each other, becoming more experienced in both their works. It can be assumed Day could have easily escaped Arkham City at any time, yet he longed to share the memories of his work with Batman like an old friend would, even promising that because he was there at his beginning, he would be there at his end, a promise he fulfilled. The Dark Knight Challenges system in Batman Arkham Origins was a significant departure from the challenges systems in Asylum and City. Instead of just being side objectives, these tracks were integrated into the core gameplay as a linear progression system. The goal was to simulate Batman's evolution across 4 distinct disciplines: combat, traversal, stealth, and investigation. By completing these tiered ranks, players unlocked massive XP boosts, specific gadget upgrades like the Sonic Batarang, and ultimately the prestigious Dark Knight skin. The system is divided into 4 specific paths, each requiring the player to master a different aspect of being Batman. Unlike the Riddler challenges in previous games, these must be completed in order, which means you can't skip to rank 5 without finishing rank 4 first. Well, firstly, we have the Shadow Vigilante, which focuses on combat. This track focuses on the free-flow combat system. Early ranks require simple tasks, like maintaining an 8x combo, while later ranks demand perfection, such as finishing a fight with a 50x combo and multiple variations, using different gadgets and moves in a single flow without taking a single hit. Then we have Gotham Protector, which is transversal. This track tests your mastery with Batman's movement. It involves gliding specific distances, performing 150-meter dives, and successfully using the grapnel boost to transition between districts. It effectively teaches the player how to navigate the doubled map size of Origins efficiently. Then comes the Worst Nightmare or Predator. Widely considered the hardest track, this focuses on stealth. It requires specific, often difficult takedowns, such as taking out 3 enemies with a single propane tank, or performing an inverted takedown, a vent takedown, and a wall takedown in one encounter. Lastly, we have the world's greatest detective, which focuses on investigation. This track is tied to the game's case file system and Enigma's data packs. It rewards the player for reconstructing crime scenes and finding the hidden logic behind Gotham's criminal underworld. One of the most defining and sometimes frustrating details of this system is its linear nature. In Arkham City, if you performed a difficult glide, the game would bank that achievement for you. In Origins, if you perform a rank 10 feat or still on rank 3, it doesn't count. This created a high-pressure environment for players, especially regarding the worst nightmare track. Completing all 60 challenges, 15 in each of these 4 tracks, unlocks the Dark Knight suit. This isn't just a cosmetic skin, it's a symbol of total mastery over the game's mechanics. The suit itself is a sleek, all-black version of the default Origins armor, removing the grey tones for a more traditional, menacing creature of the night look. It's a literal manifestation of the Year 2 goal. By the time you earn it, you've moved from a raw vigilante to the polished, unstoppable force of nature that Gotham fears. Did you know about the previous identity of the Joker? Well, yeah. The Joker's psyche sequence is widely regarded as one of the most creative narrative segments in the Arkham series. It occurs after Batman saves the Joker from falling to his death at the Royal Hotel. Once in custody at Blackgate, Joker meets with a young, idealistic Dr. Harleen Quinzel for a psychiatric evaluation. As he begins to tell her his origin story, the perspective shifts. And for the first and only time in the series, the player takes direct control of the Joker, specifically in his previous identity as the Red Hood. The sequence is presented in a heavily stylized, noir-inspired aesthetic. The world is mostly black and white, except for vibrant, glowing reds symbolizing the Red Hood and violence, and greens symbolizing the chemicals and the future Joker. As the player walks through the distorted memory of the Ace Chemicals plant, the environment shifts and warps around them. Walls dissolve into memories, and the thugs Joker worked with appear as shadowy, faceless figures. This walking simulator style allows the player to experience the Joker's unreliable narration firsthand, feeling the claustrophobia of the Red Hood helmet and the mounting panic of a botched heist. The gameplay takes the player for a loose adaptation of the iconic The Killing Joke comic. As the Red Hood, you navigate narrow catwalks over vats of bubbling green acid. The atmosphere during this section is chilling. Joker, voiced by Troy Baker, recounts the desperation that led him to that night. He views the police and the security guards not as men, but as obstacles in a nightmare. When Batman finally appears at the end of the catwalk, he isn't the hero we know. From the perspective of the terrified Red Hood, Batman is a monstrous, demonic figure. He's depicted as a giant, shadowy bat with glowing eyes and jagged wings towering over the player. This brilliantly illustrates how the criminal underworld viewed the Year 2 Batman. Not as a man in a suit, but a literal, supernatural force of vengeance. The sequence culminates in the iconic fall into the chemical vat. As the Red Hood, the player is backed into a corner by the Bat Monster. Batman reaches out a hand to save him, a direct parallel to the Royal Hotel scene earlier in the game, but the player as Joker slips and falls into the green abyss. The screen erupts into a kaleidoscope of green and purple as the Joker is born. This is followed by a haunting mirror sequence where the player sees the Red Hood helmet shatter to reveal the chalk-white skin and permanent grin. This entire segment serves a vital narrative purpose. It explains why the Joker became obsessed with Batman. He doesn't hate Batman for making him, he loves Batman for being the only consistent thing in this chaotic world. It recontextualizes the entire game from a simple mob war into a deadly romance between two damaged souls who met in the green glow of a chemical plant. It wasn't just the 8 assassins who wanted the bounty of Batman in Arkham Origins. It's the systematic rot within the Gotham City Police Department. Unlike the later games, where the police are stalwart allies under Jim Gordon, the Origins era portrays the GCPD as a legalized gang. Led by the terminally corrupt Commissioner Gillian B. Loeb, the department views the Batman not as a vigilante, but as a direct threat to their lucrative criminal partnerships. When the $50 million bounty is announced, the GCPD stops even pretending to uphold the law, effectively becoming the 9th assassin faction hunting Batman across the city. Commissioner Loeb is the personification of Gotham's old guard corruption. He doesn't just tolerate crime, he manages it like a business. Loeb views Batman as an unpredictable variable that threatens the equilibrium he's established with mobsters like Carmine Falcone and Roman Sionis. His antagonism isn't ideological, it's financial. Early in the game, during the Blackgate prison riot, we see Loeb's true colors when he's found in a compromised position, showing he has zero control over his own precinct. His eventual interrogation by the Joker, disguised as Black Mask, in the gas chamber is a brutal narrative beat. It shows that even the man at the top of the food chain is nothing more than a pawn in the Joker's larger game. His death creates a power vacuum that allows more aggressive, bounty-hungry elements of the GCPD to take the lead. Loeb isn't the only worry for Batman, though. If Loeb is the corrupt architect, SWAT leader Howard Brandon is the blunt instrument. Brandon is depicted as a tactical sociopath who has completely abandoned the police code in favor of the $50 million payout. He leads a specialized, off-the-books unit of SWAT officers who are better equipped and more disciplined than the standard street thugs. Throughout the game, Brandon's team utilizes advanced tactics, including flashbangs, shields, and heavy armor, making them some of the most difficult non-boss enemies to fight. Brandon's motivation is purely greed. He's overheard on the police frequencies telling his men that the bounty is retirement money. He represents the Year 2 reality that Batman can't even trust the people wearing badges, forcing Bruce to treat the GCPD as a hostile army rather than potential partners. The corruption of the GCPD fundamentally changes how you play the game compared to Arkham City or Night. One of the game's most tense sequences involves Batman breaking into the GCPD headquarters. Because he refuses to use lethal force against law enforcement, which, as we all know, is the OG Batman rule, the player is forced to use non-lethal, high-speed takedowns to navigate a building filled with dozens of officers who are authorized to shoot him on sight. This corruption is why Captain James Gordon is so hesitant to trust Batman. Gordon is one of the few clean cops left, but he views Batman as just another costumed freak contributing to the chaos. The Year 2 script uses the GCPD's corruption as a hurdle that Batman must overcome to prove to Gordon that he's a necessary evil in a city where the good guys have sold their souls. The Blackgate bookend is a structural narrative device used in Batman Arkham Origins to show the evolution of Batman over the course of a single, chaotic night. By starting and ending the story in the same location, which is the Blackgate Penitentiary, the game creates a full-circle moment that highlights how much the stakes have shifted from a standard mob war to the birth of the supervillain era. As we know, the game opens on Christmas Eve with Batman infiltrating Blackgate to stop a mass breakout orchestrated by Black Mask. At this stage of the story, Batman is viewed as a myth or a dangerous masked freak by the GCPD. The mission serves as a tutorial, but also establishes the gritty realism of the corrupt Gotham. The story concludes by returning to a much more devastated Blackgate, following the reveal that Joker was posing as Black Mask. The Clown Prince orchestrates a second, far more chaotic riot to force a final confrontation with Batman. To force Batman's hand, Joker rigs an electric chair to a heart monitor on Bane. To save the Joker's life and maintain his moral code, Batman is forced to use the shock gloves to stop Bane's heart temporarily, killing him to stop the chair, only to resuscitate him moments later. Using Blackgate as the bookend serves a deeper thematic purpose. In the beginning, Batman is fighting a mobster to save a corrupt official. By the end, he's fighting a maniac to save his greatest enemy. This symmetry marks the death of the old Gotham and the birth of the Arkham era. The facility itself transforms. At the start, it's a functional prison, and by the end, it's a burning war zone, symbolizing that standard incarceration is no longer enough to hold the new class of criminals Batman has attracted. This directly foreshadows the eventual need for Arkham Asylum to be reopened, as mentioned in the game's epilogue. The Queen Industries shipping crates are one of the most famous DC Universe Easter eggs in Batman Arkham Origins. serving as a direct nod to the existence of Oliver Green, aka Green Arrow within the Arkhamverse. It's located deep within the bowels of the Final Offer, the massive cargo ship owned by the Penguin, mentioned previously in the video. This reference was particularly exciting for fans upon the game's release, as it confirmed the world of Batman was part of a much larger superhero community, even if those heroes never appear on screen. Well, the crate isn't just sitting in plain sight, it requires a bit of navigation and the use of Batman's gadgets to find. To locate it, you must head to the boiler deck, also known as the pit, where the underground cage fights take place. Once in the boiler deck, look up to find an anchor point for your remote claw. After creating a tightrope and crossing it, look toward the lower left section of the room near 3 numbered hatches, 1, 2, and 3. Tucked away in an industrial corner is a large, weathered shipping container with the Queen Industries logo prominently displayed. The logo features a stylized Q that, in the Origins era, looks somewhat like a crosshair or a target, a subtle hint at Oliver Queen's archery skills. The container you see isn't just a random asset, it's a part of the game's environmental storytelling regarding the Penguin's criminal enterprise. Inside the Penguin's private office on the ship, players can find a list of potential heist targets. Queen Industries is listed alongside other major DC corporations, like LexCorp and Amatec. This suggests that the Penguin has been intercepting shipments from Star City, and is actively planning to dismantle or rob Oliver Queen's company to fund his own weapons-dealing operations. Furthermore, a promotional trailer of the game showed a Queen Industries toolbox being used by thugs. In the lore of the game, it appears the Joker and his contractors, specifically Deathstroke, may have utilized Queen Industries equipment. This is a particularly deep cut, because Deathstroke is traditionally a primary rival of the Green Arrow in the comics, making his involvement with Queen-branded gear a clever wink to their comic book history. This single crate on the Final Offer sets the stage for several other references to the Emerald Archer throughout the series. For starters, in Arkham Knight, reporter Jack Ryder can be heard discussing a story he's writing about a real sharpshooter CEO from Star City. Also, by the time of Arkham Knight, a full Queen Industries building is under construction in Gotham, showing that Oliver Queen's influence grew significantly in the years following the events of Origins. Did you catch the mention of Captain Boomerang? Well, it was one of the most clever ways the developers signaled that Gotham isn't the only city with a freak problem. While the game focuses on Batman Year 2, this specific piece of world-building confirms that the Flash and his rogues are already active in the neighbouring Central City. This Easter egg is found during the escaped Blackgate prisoners side mission. As you track down the 20 high-level convicts who fled during the Christmas Eve riot, you can hover near groups of thugs in the Bowery or near the GCPD and listen to their chatter. One specific prisoner, clearly traumatized by his time outside of Gotham, explains to his confused associates why he's so twitchy. The dialogue unfolds when the prisoner says, "I need a place to hide, man. I'm telling you, there's some guy with a boomerang after me." And the thug replies, "You mean the bat? Those aren't boomerangs, they're batarangs. Everybody knows that." The prisoner again tells him, "No, it's definitely not the bat. This guy is dressed totally different. He calls himself Captain. Look, can we just finish this somewhere safe?" Now, this interaction is a brilliant bit of meta-humor. In a city where a man dressed as a bat is the norm, the idea of a captain throwing boomerangs is treated as an even more ridiculous and terrifying prospect. It implies that this prisoner likely fled Central City to escape George Digger Harkness, only to realize he jumped from the frying pan into the fire by landing in Batman's territory. In Origins, Boomerang is treated as a localized myth from another city, a crazy guy that Gotham criminals haven't had to deal with yet, which makes the later escalation of the Arkhamverse feel much more earned. A movie poster for Funny Face is a subtle but layered piece of environmental storytelling found throughout Arkham Origins. These posters, which prominently feature the name Basil Karlo, act as a haunting reminder of the man who would eventually become the shape-shifting monster known as Clayface. In the Origins timeline, Carlo is still primarily known to the public as a legendary character actor of the silent and early sound eras of Gotham cinema. The posters depict him in various theatrical poses, celebrating his reputation as a master of disguise who could transform into anyone using only makeup and prosthetics. You can find these posters plastered on the brick walls of the amusement mile and near the Monarch Theatre in the Bowery. The poster's design is deliberately vintage, using a golden age of Hollywood aesthetic that makes Gotham feel older and more lived in. Finding these near Monarch Theatre is particularly significant, as that theatre represents the death of Bruce Wayne's childhood. The poster often features the text, "The Man of a Thousand Faces," which serves as a tragic foreshadowing of his eventual loss of a stable, human identity. If we dive into the lore of the Arkham universe, Basil Karlo's descent into villainy is tied to his fading fame. He was a classically trained actor who was driven mad when his most famous films were slated for remakes with younger actors. While he doesn't appear as a physical antagonist in Origins, these posters confirm that he's already a cultural icon in Gotham. By the time we reached the events of Arkham City, roughly a decade later, Carlo has fully transformed into the giant mud-like entity. Origins uses these posters to ground the supernatural elements of the later games in a more mundane, human tragedy, showing that before he was a monster, he was a man obsessed with his own reflection. Some of us might have noticed that the Joker's visual appearance functions as a physical timeline of the game's chaotic Christmas Eve. Unlike the established, polished villain seen in Arkham Asylum, the Origins Joker is a raw, emerging force of nature. To reflect this, the developers implemented a progressive character degradation system. As the night wears on and the intensity of his encounters with Batman increases, the Joker's character model undergoes subtle but constant changes, shifting from a manicured businessman persona into the wild, disheveled anarchist that becomes his trademark look. The transformation begins in earnest after the Gotham Merchants Bank reveal. Before this, while impersonating Black Mask, the Joker's makeup is relatively pristine. His white face paint is smooth and his hair is slicked back. However, once he abandons the Roman Sionis persona, the performance begins to take a physical toll. By the time Batman reaches the Royal Hotel, the Joker has been through explosions, high-altitude scraps, and a manic, emotional high. You can notice the red grease paint around his mouth beginning to smear upward into his cheeks, and the dark, hollow makeup around his eyes starts to smudge, giving him a more skeletal, haggard appearance. Well, after the explosion, the smoke, heat, and physical trauma of falling from a skyscraper leave the Joker looking visibly broken. The white foundation starts to crack and thin, revealing patches of his actual pale skin underneath. The smile is no longer a clean line. It's jagged, messy, and red, with a stain that looks more like a fresh wound than theatre makeup. Also, his vibrant green hair, which started the night neatly coiffed, becomes a matted, wild mess. Strands fall over his forehead, and the slicked-back style completely collapses, representing his loss of control over the narrative he tried to write for the evening. Even his iconic purple suit reflects the night's brutality, showing singe marks from explosions and a layer of Gotham's grime and snow, stripping away the mob boss's elegance he started with. By the final confrontation in the Blackgate Prison Chapel, the Joker's appearance is at its most feral. He's been beaten, arrested, and psychologically shaken by his evaluation with Harleen Quinzel. At this stage, he looks less like a man in a costume and more like a ghost. The smearing of his makeup is so severe that the green, white, and red begin to blend into a muddy, bruised-looking mess. This visual unraveling is a deliberate choice by the art team to mirror his internal obsession. The more he fixates on Batman, the less he cares about his own physical presentation. He's completely shed the Edward Nashton-style professionalism for a look that's defined entirely by his relationship with his new soulmate, the Dark Knight. Did you know that there are Harvey Dent campaign posters in Batman Arkham Origins? Yeah, and it's a masterclass in environmental irony. Located deep within the GCPD headquarters, specifically in the Major Crimes Unit and near the locker rooms, The poster features a clean cut, smiling Harvey Dent alongside the slogan, "Dent for DA," or "A New Start for Gotham." In a game defined by the systemic corruption of Commissioner Loeb and the brutal SWAT teams led by Brandon, the presence of a White Knight candidate hanging on the walls of a precinct that essentially functions as a criminal enterprise is a sharp, intentional contrast. Finding this poster during the Year 2 era is significant because it establishes Harvey Dent as the city's last best hope for legal reform. While the GCPD officers you encounter are largely looking to collect a $50 million bounty on Batman's head, the poster represents a segment of Gotham that still believes in the system. The poster utilizes a classic red, white, and blue political palette. Unlike the gritty, soot-stained streets outside, the poster is relatively pristine, reflecting Dent's Golden Boy statue before his eventual, tragic transformation into Two-Face. Placing it in the GCPD as well is particularly biting. It serves as a constant reminder to the corrupt cops of the threat of a prosecutor who actually wants to put them behind bars. It's a silent witness to the very corruption Harvey is campaigning to destroy. While Harvey Dent doesn't physically appear in Arkham Origins, his presence is felt through these posters and various audio logs. The script implies that Dent is already a rising star who's beginning to notice the master vigilante in the streets. The posters help flesh out the world Captain James Gordon is trying to save. Gordon and Dent are often cited in DC lore as the only two clean men in the city, and the poster serves as a tether to that Year 1 narrative, where the two are just beginning their crusade against the mob. Also, if you listen to the radios found in the GCPD break rooms, news anchors occasionally mention Dent's polling numbers or his latest stance against the Penguin's weapon smuggling operations, further grounding him as a functional part of the city's living history. You can find the alley where it all began, the alley where Bruce's destiny to be the Batman was written. Situated in Park Row, directly behind the Monarch Theatre, the alley is a frozen-in-time memorial. While the game takes place on Christmas Eve, the atmosphere in this specific location is uniquely heavy. The high contrast in neon of the theatre's The Mask of Zorro signage casts long, cinematic shadows across the snow-dusted pavement, highlighting the two red roses and the chalk outlines that mark where Thomas and Martha Wayne fell. In Origins, the murder site is not just an Easter egg, but the center of a most wanted investigation called Case File No. 9, Crime Alley Shootings. The crime was almost a replica of the Wayne murder. A young socialite couple, Horace Riley and Clarissa Rodriguez, were found murdered in the same spot and manner as Bruce's parents. Upon arriving, Batman's dialogue becomes noticeably more somber, noting that he knows the victims, and recognizing the disturbing similarities to his own past. A crazy detail during this occurs when, in detective mode reconstruction, the game utilizes a haunting visual trick. As you scrub through the holographic timeline to identify the killer, the models of the new victims momentarily flicker and are replaced by the ghostly figures of Thomas and Martha Wayne, lying in the snow. This brief hallucination emphasizes Bruce's fragile mental state during his Year 2 as Batman. While the Pay Your Respects achievement is most famous for its appearance in Arkham City, the presence of the site in Origins serves a different narrative purpose. In Origins, Bruce is younger, angrier, and more haunted. The interaction here is less about honoring a legacy than it is in City and Night, and more about the raw, unhealed trauma of a man who's still struggling to separate his mission from his grief. This is reinforced by the fact the killer of the couple is eventually revealed to be a disgruntled former employee, a nobody criminal who accidentally mirrored the most significant event in Batman's life. The posters for Zatanna's magic show in Batman Arkham Origins are some of the most enduring pieces of world-building in the game, serving to establish the supernatural side of the DC universe early in Batman's career. These posters, which typically feature the text, "Amazing Magic Show, The Thrilling Zatanna," depict the mistress of magic in her classic stage outfit, top hat, fishnets, and tuxedo jacket. While they're scattered across various districts of Gotham, their presence near the Monarch Theatre in Park Row is the most poignant, as it links two of Bruce Wayne's most significant childhood influences, the cinema where his parents died, and the world of stage magic where he received much of his early training. The posters are strategically placed in areas associated with entertainment and high-traffic commerce. Specifically, you can find a cluster of these posters on the brick walls surrounding the theatre and in the adjacent crime alley. The irony here is thick. While the theatre represents Bruce's greatest tragedy, Zatanna represents a light from the past. In many DC continuities, including the Arkham universe, Bruce trained in escapism and sleight of hand under Zatanna's father, Giovanni Zatara. The reference to Zatanna extends beyond simple paper posters. In the My Alibi nightclub located in the Coventry district, players can find physical evidence of her presence. Tucked away in the back room of the club is a top hat, Zatanna's signature accessory, resting on a table. This implies that she may have been in the middle of preparing for her show before the Penguin's thugs took over the club, or before the freeze-ray chaos ensued. The inclusion of the hat alongside Ratcatcher's mask and gloves in the same room suggests that the My Alibi Club is a hub for Gotham's more eccentric theatrical personalities. While playing the game, you may have noticed some crates of the Ferris aircraft. These crates are primarily located in the industrial district, scattered around the exterior of the Sionis steel mill and the surrounding loading docks. They're marked with the company's classic logo, a stylized winged F, which is the corporate branding for the Coast City-based aerospace company that famously employs Hal Jordan as its primary test pilot. Well, the presence of these crates in the industrial district isn't just a random asset flip. It serves a specific narrative purpose regarding the Penguin's smuggling empire. In Origins, Oswald Cobblepot isn't just a nightclub owner, he's the premier black market arms dealer in the tri-state area. The crates are positioned near the waterfront, implying they were offloaded from the final offer or stolen from the Gotham Pioneers bridge shipments. This tells the player that while Batman is busy fighting local crime, the city's villains are operating on a national scale, drawing resources from places like Coast City and Star City. Visually, the crates are designed to fit the game's signature matte and grime aesthetic. They're often partially buried in the dynamic snow or obscured by the harsh, high-contrast shadows of the industrial district's overhead cranes. When viewed through Batman's cowl, these crates provide a bit of flavor text for the world. They aren't interactive like the Enigma datapacks, but their placement in the world's unseen corners rewards players who take the time to inspect the environment. One of my favorite environmental details in Batman Arkham Origins is the dynamic snow. It's primarily driven by the NVIDIA PhysX and Apex turbulence frameworks. Unlike previous games that used static, painted-on textures to simulate weather, Origins treated snow as a physical entity with volume and weight. When Batman remains idle in an outdoor environment, the game uses a particle-based accumulation system that tracks the vector of the snowfall. The engine identifies horizontal surfaces, specifically Batman's broad shoulders, the cowl's brow, and the folds of his heavy cape, and begins to build a layer of white powder in real time. The piling effect is more than just a visual gimmick. It's integrated into the game's DirectX 11 tessellation pipeline. As the snow accumulates on Batman's suit, the geometry of the character model actually displaces. This means the snow has a 3D thickness that reacts to the lighting in the environment, casting tiny shadows onto the grey armor plating beneath it. What I noticed is that when you move after standing still, the snow doesn't just vanish. It realistically sloughs off based on the animation. If Batman performs a subtle neck turn or shifts his weight, the flakes on his shoulders will break apart and fall, influenced by the game's gravity physics. One of the most impressive details of the snow accumulation is how it interacts with the matte textures of the Origin suit. Because the suit is less shiny than the one in Arkham Knight, the white snow provides a stark, high-contrast visual that makes the Dark Knight stand out in the dark. The engine calculates subsurface scattering, which allows this light to bounce around inside the snow particles, giving the accumulation a soft, realistic glow, rather than looking like flat white paint. While the Magnificent Eight assassins who made the final cut for Batman Arkham Origins are iconic, the development process involved a much larger shortlist of DC's deadliest killers. To ensure a variety of gameplay styles, ranging from Copperhead's contortionist agility to Firefly's aerial pyrotechnics, several high-profile candidates were ultimately left on the cutting room floor. These rejected assassins often survive in the game's code, concept art, or as subtle environmental Easter eggs, providing a glimpse into a version of the game that could have featured even more diverse threats. Now, let's discuss who these assassins were and why they were removed. Black Spider was one of the most prominent candidates considered for the assassin lineup. Concept art for the character was even created during the early stages of development, depicting a tactical, armored version of the urban vigilante. He was intended to be a mirror to Batman, a vigilante who uses lethal force to clean up the streets. The reason he was removed was to avoid character overlap with Deadshot and Deathstroke. Although he didn't appear as a boss, his inclusion was likely meant to tie in with the game's Suicide Squad subplot, as Eric Needham is a staple member of the Task Force X in the comics. Victor Zsasz occupies a unique space between a rejected assassin and a cut mission. Early in development, Zsasz was intended to have a full Most Wanted side quest, similar to his appearances in Arkham City and Arkham Knight. In the final retail version, Zsasz is relegated to a minor cameo. You can see him on security footage in the GCPD's Major Crimes Unit, where he's being interrogated or processed. His dialogue and character model suggest a more primitive version of the killer, focusing on his early obsession with liberating people from their lives. The mission was likely removed to keep the focus on the 8 primary assassins hired by Black Mask, as Zsasz's chaotic, independent nature didn't fit the professional mercenary theme of the Christmas Eve bounty. Cheshire and the martial artist slot during the selection of the female assassins. Cheshire, aka Jaden Goyen, was a top contender before the team settled on Lady Shiva and the reimagined, female version of Copperhead. Cheshire would have brought a poisonous, acrobatic fighting style to the games, but the devs ultimately chose Lady Shiva to represent the peak martial arts challenge, and used a redesigned Copperhead to provide the contortionist poison gameplay. Cheshire's DNA, however, is clearly visible in Copperhead's animations, specifically the way she uses speed, acrobatics, and neurotoxins to disorient Batman. One of many references in Batman Arkham Origins, the Blaze Comics reference serves as a major nod to the wider DC universe, specifically to the character Booster Gold, aka Michael John Carter. In DC lore, Blaze Comics is the fictional in-universe publishing house responsible for producing the Booster Gold comic books. This is a meta-reference, as Booster Gold is a hero from the future who uses his knowledge of history and futuristic technology to stage heroic events, which he then licenses to Blaze Comics to maintain his celebrity status and wealth. While playing the game, you can find the Blaze Comics storefront located in the Diamond District, which is part of the New Gotham half of the map. The shop is easily identifiable by its large, illuminated neon signs featuring the company's logo. It's situated among other high-end retail locations, fitting the district's theme of wealth and commerce. Well, the signs are prominent enough to be seen while gliding through the district. They often appear alongside other Easter egg brands like the few we discussed in this video, reinforcing the idea that Gotham is just one piece of a much larger world inhabited by other heroes. Developers have noted in behind-the-scenes trivia that Blaze Comics is intended to be the same brand that both Bruce Wayne and Clark Kent read as children. This adds a layer of humanizing detail to the Year 2 Batman, suggesting he once enjoyed the same pulp adventures as any other kid in the DCU. Beyond just being a publisher, Blaze Comics is intrinsically tied to Booster Gold's origin. In many comic iterations, Booster actually owns Blaze Comics for his corporation, Booster Gold International. By including these signs in the Arkham games, the developers subtly hint that Michael John Carter, or at least his corporate reach, already exists in this universe. While Booster Gold never appears in person, the presence of his publisher suggests that the age of celebrity superheroes is beginning to rise alongside the dark, gritty era of the Bat. The green-eyed crows are among the most eerie and debated environmental Easter eggs in Batman Arkham Origins. These birds are found perched on gargoyles, rooftops, and streetlights throughout Gotham, most notably in the Diamond District and Coventry. While standard crows are common in the city's grim landscape, these specific specimens stand out due to their piercing, neon green eyes that glow with an unnatural intensity, even through the thickest Gotham snowfall. The primary significance of these crows is their link to Dr. Jonathan Crane, better known as the Scarecrow. While Crane does not physically appear in Arkham Origins, its presence is felt through various breadcrumbs. As we all know, crows have long been a symbol of fear and a signature animal for the Scarecrow in DC lore. In the later game Arkham Knight, Crane uses crows extensively in his cinematic sequences. The specific shade of green used for their eyes matches the colour often associated with fear gas in the Arkham series. Their presence suggests that Crane was already active in the shadows, perhaps using the birds as test subjects or observers for his early chemical formulations during Batman's Year 2. The neon green glow of the eyes uses a bloom effect that cuts through the desaturated, snowy environment, making the birds immediately noticeable to players who look upward. Unlike other environmental objects, these crows are completely non-interactive. You can't hit them with batarangs or gadgets. They simply stare at Batman with a static, unsettling gaze. This invulnerability adds to their otherworldly feel, making them less like animals and more like a psychological manifestation or a high-tech surveillance tool. Beyond the Scarecrow theory, some players have speculated that the crows could be linked to Enigma, who, in the future, is the Riddler, given his signature green color scheme. However, since Enigma typically uses mechanical gadgets like the relay servers and data packs, rather than biological ones, the Scarecrow theory remains the most widely accepted. Others suggest the crows might be a subtle nod to the Court of Owls, another shadowy organization that watches Gotham from the rooftops. While the court uses owls rather than crows, the watching from above theme fits the mystery perfectly. Regardless of their origin, they serve to make the player feel that even when Batman is alone on a rooftop, he's never truly unobserved. The Penguin's umbrella is a crucial piece of character design that reflects his status as a Year 2 villain. At this stage in the timeline, Oswald Cobblepot is not yet the eccentric collector seen in later games. He's a brutal, high society arms dealer trying to maintain an air of aristocratic legitimacy. His umbrella serves as a literal and metaphorical shield for his fragile ego, combining the elegance of a Gotham billionaire with the lethal hidden weaponry of a mob boss. The umbrella we see in Origins is characterized by a sleek, black silk canopy and a high-polished gold birdhead handle. As it is a prequel, unlike the heavily modified, clunky version seen in Arkham City, this model is slim and functional. If you're an observant player, you'd notice that its primary feature is a concealed rapier-style sword hidden within the shaft. During cutscenes on the final offer, Oswald uses the tip of the umbrella to intimidate his subordinates, highlighting his preference for refined violence over the raw brutality shown by villains like Killer Croc or Bane. The umbrella's textures utilize the game's signature matte finish for the fabric, contrasted against the high specular glint of the gold handle. This visual duality represents the Penguin himself, expensive on the outside, but jagged and dangerous underneath. The umbrella acts as a symbol of the Penguin's obsession with his family's lost status. In the Arkham universe, the Cobblepots were once one of the 5 families of Gotham, and the umbrella is a remnant of that old-world, Victorian prestige. In Origins, we see the gimmick being born out of necessity. Oswald uses the umbrella because it allows him to carry a weapon into high society events, where a gun would be too conspicuous. Also, if you scan the evidence lockers in the GCPD, you can find files suggesting that the police are already starting to log Cobblepot as a person of interest who carries concealed specialized weaponry, marking the transition from a standard criminal to a high-profile freak. The game has loads and loads of Easter eggs and references, one of which is the presence of Big Belly Burgers. Now, for those of you who don't know, in the comics, Big Belly Burger is the most popular fast food chain in the DCU, famously headquartered in Coast City and founded by a subsidiary of LexCorp. In the Year 2 setting of Origins, the chain is already a ubiquitous part of the urban landscape, its cheerful, bright red and yellow signage standing in stark contrast to the grim, snow-covered decay of a city under siege by assassins. The storefronts are primarily found in the high-traffic commercial zones of Gotham, such as the Diamond District and Coventry. The developers utilized a specific visual language for these assets to ensure they felt integrated into the game's high-contrast, cinematic mood. The iconic smiling chef mascot is often depicted holding a massive tray of burgers. The signs use a matte finish that catches the glare of nearby police sirens and neon lights, creating a grounded, weathered look that avoids looking like a clean cartoon asset. You can often find Big Belly burger trash, wrappers and cups, scattered in the snowy alleys where thugs congregate. This detail suggests that even during a citywide lockdown on Christmas Eve, the essential habits of Gotham's criminal element remain unchanged. Many of the storefronts feature flickering neon open signs. In the dark, snowy atmosphere of the industrial district, these warm glows provide a rare bit of color, highlighting the game's emphasis on high specular reflections against the matte textures of the architecture. In Arkham Origins, the Big Belly Burger storefront looks slightly more retro than the ones seen in later games like Arkham Knight. This is a deliberate design choice to reflect the decade-earlier setting. The advertisements feature older typography and a slightly more mid-century modern architectural style. It contributes to the feeling that Gotham is a city trapped in time, part 1940s noir, part modern industrial nightmare, where even a simple burger joint feels like it has decades of history behind its greasy windows. If you like to find and explore Easter eggs in games like me, then you must notice Tony Zuko's name on a bulletin board in the GCPD headquarters. For longtime fans, this name is synonymous with the tragic origin of Dick Grayson, the first Robin. Zuko is the mobster who sabotaged the trapeze ropes at Haley's Circus after the owner refused to pay protection money, leading to the deaths of the Flying Graysons. In the Year 2 setting of Origins, the name serves as a grim foreshadowing of the tragedy that has yet to occur, or is perhaps unfolding in the background of the game's timeline. The Easter egg is located within the Major Crimes Unit of the GCPD, as you navigate the precinct during the mission to access the National Criminal Database. You can find several chalkboards and most wanted pin-up boards used by detectives to track Gotham's criminal underworld. Tony Zuko is specifically listed as a high-ranking member of the Maroni crime family. His name appears alongside other notorious figures like Sal Maroni and Rupert Thorne, indicating that the GCPD has him on their radar as a significant player in organized crime. I really like the visual design, and the developers did an excellent job. The board utilizes the game's signature high-contrast, noir aesthetic. The names are scrawled in chalk or pinned as notes, surrounded by photos and maps. The matte texture of the chalkboard and the harsh fluorescent lighting of the station give the reference a grounded, procedural feel, as if he's just another file in a city drowning in corruption. What makes the Zuko reference particularly effective is how it pairs with other environmental clues throughout Gotham. While his name is on a wanted list in the GCPD, players can also find Haley's Circus posters plastered on walls in districts like the Bowery, specifically near the Gotham Cinema. Unlike the posters in Batman Arkham City, which were defaced with a large cancelled stamp, the posters in Origins proudly proclaim the show is coming soon. This detail places the player in a unique moment in history. Zuko is already a known criminal being tracked by the police, and the Graysons are currently on their way to Gotham. It creates a sense of dreadful anticipation, knowing that Batman will eventually cross paths with Zuko, not as a detective tracking a mobster, but as a mentor to a grieving boy. In the Arkham universe, Zuko's affiliation with the Maroni crime family highlights the shifting power dynamics in Gotham. During Origins, the Falcone family is still the dominant force, but the Maronis are actively carving out their own territory. Including Zuko alongside names like Louis Moxon and the Ventriloquist, referenced in other GCPD files, helps establish that Gotham is a city with a deep, pre-existing criminal history. It reinforces the idea that Batman isn't just fighting supervillains for the first time. He's dismantling a massive, entrenched infrastructure of crime that includes men like Zuko. The board suggests that despite the widespread corruption under Commissioner Loeb, there are still detectives like Jim Gordon, trying to build legitimate cases against these mid-level thugs. The Tiffany Ambrose character trophy is one of the most famous examples of ghost data in the series. While the final game's character gallery officially lists 48 unlockable trophies, Tiffany Ambrose exists in the internal game files as the hidden 49th entry. Her trophy is fully modelled and features a complete biographical write-up, yet it was deactivated just before the game's release. This led to significant confusion upon launch, as several official strategy guides, including the one by Prima Games, incorrectly listed her as a standard unlockable, leaving completionists frustrated when they couldn't find her in-game. The lore and biographical data attached to her trophy clarify that she was not a journalist, but a criminal associate and the girlfriend of the real Roman Sionis, Black Mask. Her file details a long list of priors, with a specific focus on drug trafficking and her involvement in Sionis' False Face Society operations. Physically, her trophy data defines her as being 5'7", weighing 115 pounds with blonde hair and brown eyes. The model itself depicts her in a suit, specifically a white suit and white long boots, which match her appearance at the crime scene in the final game. In the narrative of Arkham Origins, Tiffany's role is central to the Lacey Towers investigation. When Batman arrives at the penthouse on Christmas Eve, he discovers two bodies, a man initially thought to be Roman Sionis, and a woman identified as Tiffany Ambrose. Through Batman's crime scene reconstruction, he determines that Tiffany was not just a bystander, but was actively caught in the crossfire when the Joker, disguised as Black Mask, ambushed Sionis. The reconstruction shows she was used as a human shield, and eventually murdered. Marking a pivot point in the story, Batman realizes the Black Mask causing chaos in Gotham is actually an imposter. Because the trophy was never officially patched into the game, it remains accessible only to PC players who use external model viewers or modify the game files to force the gallery to display the 49th slot. Digital archaeologists have noted that the trophy is technically finished, suggesting its removal was likely due to a last-minute decision to streamline the gallery to characters who appear alive or have more significant speaking roles, rather than a technical failure. Did you know that the Alberto torture scene was actually supposed to be longer than what we got? While the final retail version of the game shows the aftermath, a bruised and terrified Alberto cowering in a GCPD interrogation cell, early script drafts and internal playtest reports suggest a much more graphic and prolonged scene. The intent was to showcase the new Black Mask's utter lack of respect for the old world mob hierarchy, proving that Roman Sionis' empire was now under the control of a true psychopath. In the original version for the GCPD infiltration, Batman was intended to witness a portion of the torture through a one-way mirror or a ventilation grate, rather than simply finding Alberto after the fact. Alberto Falcone is famously the holiday killer in the Long Halloween comics. The cut dialogue featured Joker mocking Alberto's lack of festive spirit, while physically assaulting him with office supplies and blunt instruments found in the precinct. Early storyboards depicted the Joker using a stapler or a hole punch as improvised torture devices, emphasizing the mundane horror of the setting. The blood splatter textures found in the GCPD environment are actually leftovers from this more violent iteration. In the final game, the amount of blood on the floor seems disproportionate to the relatively clean facial bruises Alberto currently sports. There are rumors of a glass-breaking sequence where Joker repeatedly slammed Alberto's head into the interrogation glass, causing it to crack and spiderweb. This was meant to be the visual cue for Batman to realize that Black Mask had physically changed, becoming more erratic and physically aggressive than the real, more calculated Roman Sionis. The decision to pull back on the graphic nature of the torture came down to two primary factors, which were rating compliance and narrative pacing. As we all know, the Arkham games before the Arkham Knight were strictly targeted at a T for teen rating. The level of realistic, non-fantasy violence depicted in the Alberto scene was reportedly pushing towards an M rating, which Warner Bros. Wanted to avoid to maximize commercial reach. Also, the devs realized that if Black Mask was sadistic too early, it might give away the Joker twist prematurely. By keeping the torture mostly off-screen or limited to the aftermath, they maintained the mystery of the villain's identity while still establishing that the new black mask was a dangerous departure from the norm. If you look closely at Alberto's model in the final game, using detective mode, you can see high-stress heart rate readings and internal trauma markers that align more with the graphic cut version than the visual model we see. His suit, which features matte textures and high-end tailoring, is shredded and stained, a visual metaphor for the ruin of his family name. The remnants of this cut scene can still be felt in the Cold Heart DLC, but the Falcone family is notably absent or weakened, having been replaced by the more theatrical gangs. The brutalization of Alberto was the catalyst that allowed the supervillains to officially take over the Gotham underworld. Have you ever noticed that the Batsuit in Batman Arkham Origins has a very familiar look to the comic book suits? This design philosophy was primarily influenced by Lee Bermejo's work on the graphic novel Batman Noel. While the Arkham City suit looked like a high-tech fabric, the Origin suit looked like a series of reinforced modular plates designed for a Year 2 Batman who's still refining his equipment. The cowl, in particular, captures the raw, aggressive energy of Bermejo's art, emphasizing function over finesse. The Origin's cowl features a prominent, scowling brow line that mimics the furrowed look in Bermejo's art. This creates deep, high-contrast shadows over the eyes, enhancing the cinematic mood of the detective sequences. Unlike the long, sweeping ears found in Arkham City, the Origin's cowl features shorter, thicker ears that are reinforced at the base. This design reflects a combat-first mentality, where the ears serve as housing for sensors and communications equipment, rather than just being an aesthetic choice. The cowl transitions into the neck with heavy, layered plating, a direct nod to the Noel suit's emphasis on protection against the blunt force trauma that Batman faces in his early years. Technically, the developers utilized high-resolution matte textures to give the cowl a weathered, industrial feel. Instead of the smooth finish seen in later suits, the Origin's cowl has a grainy, rough-cast composite look. As the game progresses, the matte surface of the cowl realistically accumulates scratches and scuffs. The high-contrast lighting of the Gotham night catches the edges of these imperfections, highlighting the wear and tear of the Christmas Eve hunt. If you look closely at the back of the cowl, you can see the interface points where it connects to the chest plate. This modular design is a hallmark of the Noel inspiration. It feels like a suit that can be taken apart and repaired in a workshop, rather than a seamless piece of superhero technology. It's worth noting that while the default suit is inspired by Noel, there's an actual Batman Noel DLC skin that's a one-to-one recreation of Lee Bermejo's design. This skin takes the Year 2 look to the extreme, featuring the iconic thick leather cape, visible zipper on the chest, and the uniquely bulbous, sewn-together cowl. Comparing the two in the game's character trophy viewer reveals how the developers took the DNA of the Noel suit, specifically its grit and high-contrast details, and adapted it into the more armored default suit that we see in the main campaign. Well, that's it for today. If you enjoyed this one, I suggest you watch 1 hour of Batman Arkham Knight Facts to Fall Asleep to that's on your screen right now. Click it and I'll see you there.